First of all, very strong, very well done overall. Okay? Things that I like and things I think everybody else probably liked in this thing is they developed interest early. Okay? They started off right away, first of all, sensitive to the fact that we've got a number of people from a number of different language backgrounds in here, and started off with an activity engaging people in all the different background of languages that exist in the room. I don't know if they hit them all, but they probably came pretty close. I don't know if we got the French in there for Olivier or not. Olivier's got about 9 languages, so he doesn't get one of the 9, you know. But that's okay. But anyway, it was a pretty good fit for a class like this, and they were well aware of that, right? That was a really good way to start. And then the other thing is, you know, along the lines of the same sort of thing with the definition, right? When everybody was sort of putting up their own definition. But the key idea there, this is useful for all of us, is try to do something like that with your own kids. You know, for example, everybody stand up. Come on, stand up, stand up, stand up. Okay? Okay, put your hands over your head and clap 3 times. Get ready, go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, sit down again. Now, if I had a kindergarten class, that might not be a bad way to start, right? Because whatever you're going to do after that, even if it's something like reading in a history section, they're kind of interested because they like moving around, right? Zanny says, then you have class management problem because a couple of them are going to be, they won't want to sit down again, so that's another issue, right? But the point I'm making is, get the interest going early by doing something that everybody's engaged with. They did that very well. It was very insightful. I mean, some of the things that were done, I wrote a few notes on this, like this thing, both of these ideas, okay? This is an older idea, it's been around a while, but it was certainly well used, and it makes you reflect, it makes you think about what's just been done. You're kind of forced into saying, wow, I can use some new ideas, right? Even if you hadn't thought of it, you know, it's there, so you've got to come up with something good, right? And this, you know, this works well. I think that everybody got, you know, at least some insight out of this in terms of having reinforced what you already knew, or in some cases maybe saying, wait, wow, I didn't know that about myself, okay? So there were lots of little pieces in this presentation that were quite insightful, and there was a lot of strength. And you can try to bring that in with your own students. You know, try to do things that will get them thinking about their own, you know, the mind maps are great for that. You know, if the kids will do something that's very individual, okay? Very insightful. It was quite active. Overall, the active theme, I think, was well done. What happened is there was a bit of a challenge with it, and here's what happened, is that you have to kind of space your activity out. You started off really well with some good activities, the definition one I've already mentioned, and also these that I've talked about here, with the surveys and that. And then what kind of happens, it went through sort of a flat spot, where there was, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in some of the other, in the application part of it, but you have to be careful. What you got to do is you got to kind of bring in enough activity. There was, you know, there was a little bit of a dead spot from about the, I want to say about the 40-minute mark. I wasn't watching my clock that closely, but it felt like about the 40-minute mark to about the 60-minute mark, where they kind of lost the class a little bit. And I think if they had thrown even zapped in one quick activity in there, that would have taken care of it, right? So it was good overall, the activity and the active aspect of it, but you just got to put enough in there to sort of space it out a little bit. Does that make sense? Okay, you guys understand what I'm saying? Okay. The theory comprehension, they need to be a little bit careful when you're presenting. Most of the theories, they had a pretty good handle on it. But the MI one in particular, actually what MI is and Howard Gardner, the fellow that came up with it, is if you go back in historically in terms of intelligence, we've always, like Stanford, Binet, and there's a number of other tests that are out there, standardized tests. And you know, the general IQ measure, intelligence quotient, right, which will tell you, you know, you are a 95 or 120 or whatever, and people go around and say, I'm brilliant, I'm 132. You know, and then other people are like, oh, I feel so bad because I'm an 80, you know, I'm dumb, right? Well, the problem is with that is exactly what Gardner discovered, is that most measures of intelligence, including the Stanford Binet and the standardized IQ tests, only measure your ability to use language. In other words, what he calls your verbal linguistic, I believe is the name of that intelligence. And that's one intelligence. And the other intelligence that most standard intelligence tests measure is your logical or mathematical intelligence. But that's only 2 intelligences. And what Gardner discovered in his work is there's actually lots of way more ways that you can be smart. In fact, there's many people out there. Salespeople are a great example. Salespeople can go into a room, get along with people, and talk to people they don't even know. You know, a salesperson could get to know people and establish rapport quite quickly. That's what enables them to be able to sell products, right? And create trust with people. That's interpersonal intelligence. That's a way of being intelligent. People like, you know, the Buddha or Jesus Christ, or many of our monks today in our temples and so on. People like the Dalai Lama. They have a very strong understanding of themselves and their own spirituality. That's called intrapersonal intelligence, or even spiritual intelligence. Now we're developing another one of these to come out. But the point is, what Gardner discovered is there's all these ways of being intelligent, and we don't measure them. We just say, you have logical mathematical ability, or you're dumb. That's it. Right? So, you know, people like Michael Jackson, for example. Michael Jackson's dumb, apparently. He's pretty successful, or was pretty successful for someone that's dumb, right? I'm being a bit sarcastic to make the point, but obviously musical intelligence is a very important skill. And it pays very well, too. You know, you can make a lot more money than you can as a university professor, for example. But the point Gardner was making is that there's all these different ways to be intelligent, right? And we don't measure it. Right? So you're okay when you're applying it, but when somebody asks you what the theory was, you got to be a little bit off. You didn't quite have that. Okay? So just be a little bit careful that when you're going to present something, you have the backgrounding in it. Okay? Not a criticism, just something to be aware of. Okay? So applications, again, overall very strong. One of the things that I thought was when they were doing some of their direct instruction parts, they put up the cone of learning, and then also there's a pyramid put up, and then some of the ones that were done, I can't remember, one of the 2 of the ones that you were doing, I can't remember, you had some of the different processes up. What happened there was, in actual fact, in pretty much every case, both Emil and Martin were sort of explaining, yeah, what the applications were. In actual fact, what they could have done was, they could have just said what it is and explained it. And then say, okay guys, can you give me right now, quick, you know, I'm going to give you each 30 seconds, turn to your partner, and come up with how you could apply this. Give me one idea, right? And then in pairs, and then you don't have to go to all of them, that would be too long. You go, okay, you know, guy A and me, what did you come up with? Just like that, right? And by doing it that way, you get them more involved, because that's sort of where the flat spot was. Okay, so what happened was you got a little away from your applications, a little bit too much direct instruction. There's nothing wrong with direct instruction. Okay, I'm not saying there is. But what you could do to engage people is once you've explained something, just give them a quick 30 seconds. That's all you need. Or, you know, if it's kids, you probably need 2 minutes, right? To just get them to give you a couple of examples, and then you can go on to the next segment. Okay, so just something to be aware of. Adjustments. Let me just, I just want to check my notes here for a second. Oh yeah, I love the way they talk about the content, the process, the product, and then the continuous assessment. This is really related to the content of the presentation now, but talking about the adjustments in DI, how we're adjusting to match the needs of students, that was a great discussion that they had there, and I just want everybody to pay particular attention to that when you get to, I guess we'll be getting the slide packages to everyone at some point, right? And maybe you can do a little extra reading on that. But that's where we even talked about the process-product balance, right? The content is in there too. But that was a really great discussion about the 3 things we can adjust. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, because that's very useful. The other thing is, I loved all the examples. Great, you know, they talked about different types of books you can use, and they had examples there. They talked about some of the ways that you could build vocabulary, and they had the Scholastic example. They talked about assessing learning, and they had the example of a quick assessment at the end. Everything that they did, they had an example for it. They had some sort of way to say, this is something you use. Graphic organizers on the board, on the slides. And that's excellent. That's something you can do in your own lessons. Is when you're going to do something, try to give an example or try to give an illustration. Because kids, especially, will learn much more from that. You know, kids are like, wow, I can actually see where this works, right? Okay, so very, very strong on that point. The only last thing is I wrote here, because this kind of goes back to Zani's point, but this is what this looks like, to be honest with you, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, it's just chaos. And it happens sometimes. I've been there and done that. I've done it, okay? But what you're aiming for is controlled chaos, okay? So talking about what you know, because sometimes when you're doing some of these things in the classroom, I mean, I'll be honest with you today, my classes are small. I'm in special ed classes. I got like 5 or 6 or 7 kids, right? And, you know, I'm sitting there today and I got some of the kids working on the computer and I got kids walking around doing something else. And, you know, now my principal's pretty cool, you know, they sort of have an understanding what's going on. But, you know, some administrators will walk in and they go, what's going on in this room, man? This is nuts, right? But in actual fact, it's working. Because, you know, the kids are working on the computers, they're engaged in something, and the others are doing something else. But when you differentiate and you sort of step out there and do it, it gets a little nuts. And it will. And what you aim for is controlled chaos. What I mean by that is, it is going to be a little crazy, but that's okay. The control is that people are learning, that they're not just goofing off, right? And that you're bringing the kids back on when they get off, because they will get off task. And when they're young, Johnny, they're going to get off more. And that's absolutely true. Okay? Any questions on the presentation tonight? Let's give him a hand. He did a great job.